Welcome to Empathy Stories, where the power of kindness and resilience takes center stage. Today, we're diving into the incredible journey of Elijah Carter, a young man who turned an act of compassion into a life-changing opportunity. This is a story of hope, perseverance, and the bonds that shape our lives. Let's begin. The morning light filtered through the towering glass windows of Grand Central Station, casting fractured beams onto the bustling crowd below. Elijah Carter, a young man barely in his 20s, moved through the chaos with a determination that masked the weight he carried on his shoulders. His mother, a woman whose resilience had kept their small family together, was growing weaker by the day. Mounting medical bills and the relentless pressure to provide had left Elijah with no choice but to take every opportunity he could find. Today, that opportunity was a job interview, his one chance to secure steady work and a lifeline for his mother. Elijah's worn sneakers scuffed against the polished tiles, the soles threatening to give out with every hurried step. His backpack felt heavier than usual, though it carried only a few documents and the faint hope of a better future. He kept his head down, weaving through the crowd, muttering polite apologies as he sidestepped travelers dragging oversized luggage. The station's iconic clock loomed ahead, its hands ticking closer to his scheduled time. He was still on track, but only just. As Elijah ascended the staircase leading out of the main concourse, he noticed an elderly man standing at the top, his figure slightly hunched, a walking cane clutched under his arm. The man's head turned back and forth, his expression a mixture of confusion and quiet desperation. People rushed past him, their faces blank, their focus fixed on their destinations. Elijah hesitated for a moment, his grip tightening on his backpack strap. He had somewhere to be, somewhere important. Yet, he couldn't shake the image of the old man, his hand trembling as he tried to orient himself amidst the sea of indifference. Someone else will help him, Elijah muttered under his breath, willing himself to keep moving. But as he descended the first few steps, his conscience pulled him back. He stopped, turned around, and began pushing against the flow of the crowd to return to the man. "Excuse me, sir," Elijah said, his voice cutting through the noise of rolling suitcases and hurried footsteps. "Do you need some help?" The man turned his head toward Elijah, his cloudy eyes narrowing slightly. Relief softened his lined face as he nodded. Yes, young man. I can't quite make out the stairs. It's these eyes of mine. Everything's so blurry these days." Elijah offered his arm without hesitation. "Let me help you down." The man, who introduced himself as Charles Benson, hesitated briefly before accepting the offer, his bony fingers wrapped around Elijah's arm, their grip both frail and firm. Together, they began their descent. The journey was slow, each step requiring care and precision. Elijah could feel the impatience of commuters behind them, audible sighs, muttered complaints, and the occasional bump from someone in a hurry. He ignored them, focusing on Mr. Benson and the quiet gratitude in the man's voice as they spoke. "Thank you," Mr. Benson said, his voice shaky. "It's rare these days. You know, people willing to stop and help." "It's no problem," Elijah replied, though a glance at the clock made his heart sink. He was running out of time. They reached the bottom of the stairs, and Mr. Benson let out a sigh of relief, leaning more heavily on his cane. "I don't know what I would have done without you, son." "Really?" Elijah managed a small smile, despite the growing knot in his stomach. "You sure you'll be okay from here?" "I'll be fine." "Yes," Mr. Benson assured him. "But you've done more than enough." "What's your name, young man?" "Elijah Carter." Mr. Benson nodded, reaching into the pocket of his coat. "Well, Elijah Carter, take this." He handed over a simple business card. "If you ever need anything, give me a call." Elijah hesitated but accepted the card, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface. The name read Charles Benson, followed by a phone number. There was no title, no company name, just a name and a promise. "Thanks," Elijah said, tucking the card into his pocket. "Take care of yourself." As he turned and hurried back into the crowd, Elijah couldn't help but glance at the clock again. He was late. His stomach churned with the realization that he might have just lost his chance. But even as the weight of that loss settled over him, the image of Mr. Benson's grateful smile lingered in his mind. Perhaps, in some way, it hadn't been a wasted effort after all. Elijah arrived at the building for his interview, his breath coming in short, labored gasps. He rushed to the receptionist's desk, barely managing to get his words out. "Hi, I'm here for the interview." It was at 10. The receptionist, a woman in her 40s with glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, looked at him with a mix of sympathy and professionalism. She glanced at the clock before shaking her head. "I'm sorry. The interviews have already concluded." Elijah's shoulders slumped. "Please," he tried again, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "Is there any way?" She sighed, her expression softening. "I'm sorry. You can try again next week." Elijah nodded, the lump in his throat making it impossible to say more. He turned and walked back outside, the city's noise swallowing him whole. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? Helping Mr. Benson had been the right choice. Yet, as he trudged back to Grand Central, he couldn't ignore the weight of disappointment pressing down on him. When he reached the station again, the old man was still there, leaning against a column, his figure barely noticeable amidst the constant motion of the crowd. Elijah approached, his steps hesitant. "Mr. Benson, you're still here." The man's face lit up with recognition. "Ah, Elijah, I was hoping I might see you again." Elijah blinked in surprise. "Why?" "To thank you," Mr. Benson said simply, "and to remind you, acts of kindness like yours don't go unnoticed. They never do." Elijah didn't know what to say. He offered a faint smile before turning to leave, Mr. Benson's words lingering in his mind. As he walked away, the business card in his pocket seemed to weigh a little heavier, its presence a quiet reminder that perhaps this day held more significance than he realized. The following morning, the faint light of dawn filtered through the thin curtains in Elijah's modest bedroom. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous day. The image of Mr. Benson's frail, yet kind face lingered in his mind, along with the weight of the business card tucked safely into his backpack. He hadn't thought much of it then, just a small token of appreciation from an elderly man he'd helped. But now, in the quiet of the morning, the card felt like a key, though to what? He couldn't yet say. Elijah's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his mother coughing in the next room. He got up quickly, pulling on his worn jacket as he stepped into her room. She was sitting up in bed, her face pale but illuminated by a faint, tired smile when she saw him. "Morning, Eli," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Elijah admitted, sitting on the edge of her bed, just thinking. His mother tilted her head slightly, her frail hand resting on his arm. "About the interview?" Elijah nodded, the sting of disappointment still fresh. "I missed it, Mom. I was helping this old man at the station. He needed someone, and I couldn't just leave him there. But by the time I got to the office, it was too late." Her expression softened, her eyes filling with pride. "You did the right thing, Elijah. Helping someone in need is never a waste. Opportunities will come, but moments like that, they matter." Elijah sighed, her words offering comfort, but doing little to ease the knot in his chest. "I just wish I could do more. For you. For us." His mother smiled gently. "You're doing enough, Eli. More than enough." After helping her get settled with a cup of tea, Elijah grabbed his backpack and headed to the local library. He planned to search for new job postings, though the weight of discouragement made every step feel heavier. The library, with its quiet rows of books and softly humming computers, had always been a refuge for Elijah, a place where he could focus, even if just for a few hours. As he scrolled through endless listings on an outdated computer, his mind wandered to Mr. Benson's card. Something about the old man had seemed different, gentle but commanding, as though he carried an air of significance. Elijah shook his head, dismissing the thought. It was just a card, a gesture of gratitude, nothing more. Hours passed, and Elijah was no closer to finding a new opportunity. He packed up his things, deciding to head home. As he stepped outside, The brisk morning air carried a surprising sight: a sleek black car parked directly in front of his house. Elijah's heart skipped a beat. His neighborhood wasn't the kind of place where luxury cars made casual visits. A man in a sharp suit stood beside the car, scanning the street as though waiting for someone. Elijah approached cautiously, his footsteps faltering as the man's eyes landed on him. "Elijah Carter?" the man asked, his tone professional but polite. Elijah nodded, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, that's me. Can I help you?" The man extended an envelope toward him. "This is for you. From Mr. Charles Benson." Elijah blinked, his confusion deepening. "Mr. Benson? The man from the station?" The suited man nodded. "Yes. He asked me to deliver this personally." Elijah's hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope. The weight of it was both literal and figurative. Heavy with possibilities, he opened it carefully, revealing a neatly folded letter. The words, written in an elegant script, took his breath away. "I wanted to thank you once again for your kindness yesterday. Acts of compassion like yours are rare, and they deserve recognition. What you may not know is that I have spent my life building opportunities for others, and I see in you a rare quality: integrity, humility, and an unwavering willingness to help those in need. I would like to offer you an internship at one of the firms I am closely associated with. This is not merely a token gesture. It is an invitation to explore your potential. The driver will return tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. to take you to the office. I hope you will accept this opportunity. Warm regards, Charles Benson." Elijah stared at the letter, the words blurring as his mind raced to comprehend what he had just read. An internship? At a firm? This couldn't be real. He looked up at the driver, his voice barely a whisper. This is serious?" The man nodded, his professional demeanor softening just slightly. "Mr. Benson doesn't make empty offers. Young man, he sees something in you. Take the chance." Elijah's heart pounded as he nodded. "Okay, I'll be ready." As the car pulled away, Elijah stood frozen on the sidewalk, the letter still clutched in his hand. When he finally stepped inside the house, his mother was waiting, her eyes filled with curiosity and concern. "Eli? What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Elijah held up the letter, his words tumbling out in disbelief. "Mom, you're not going to believe this. The man I helped yesterday, he's offering me an internship. He sent someone here to tell me." Her eyes widened, tears quickly welling up. "Oh, Eli," she whispered, her voice breaking. I told you good things would come." He sat beside her, his hands still trembling as she read the letter. Her tears fell freely, her pride and relief spilling over in equal measure. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight pressing down on them lifted, leaving only hope in its place. That night, Elijah lay in bed staring at the ceiling once again. But this time, his thoughts were different. The future no longer felt like an insurmountable mountain. It felt like a path he was finally being given the chance to walk. And for the first time in years, Elijah allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. The next morning, Elijah woke before dawn, the weight of anticipation pulling him from sleep. The glow of the rising sun crept through the curtains, illuminating his small, cluttered room. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the letter from Mr. Benson. This was his moment, a chance to change not just his life but his mother's as well. It was daunting, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. He dressed carefully, pulling on his only button-up shirt and a pair of slacks that were slightly too short. He polished his worn shoes to a faint shine and ran a comb through his hair, doing his best to look the part. When he stepped into his mother's room to say goodbye, she was already awake, her frail frame propped up against a stack of pillows. "Elijah," she said softly, her voice warm despite its weakness. "You look so handsome. Today is your day. Son, I can feel it." He smiled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I'll do my best. Mom, I promise." Her hand reached for his, squeezing it gently. "You've already done enough. Just be yourself. That's more than enough." The black car was waiting outside, its sleek exterior reflecting the morning light. Elijah hesitated for a moment, the gravity of the day sinking in, before he straightened his shoulders and stepped out the door. The driver greeted him with a polite nod, opening the door as Elijah climbed into the plush interior. The drive to the office felt surreal. As the car wove through the city, Elijah stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of his neighborhood give way to gleaming skyscrapers and bustling sidewalks. The farther they went, the more he felt like he was stepping into a world he'd only ever seen from the outside. When the car pulled up in front of a towering glass building, Elijah's breath caught. It was sleek, modern, and imposing, everything his life had never been. The driver opened the door, offering him an encouraging nod as he stepped out. Inside, the air was cool and filled with the soft hum of activity. Polished floors gleamed underfoot, and sharply dressed professionals moved with purpose through the lobby. Elijah approached the reception desk, his heart pounding in his chest. "Good morning," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm Elijah Carter. Mr. Benson is expecting me." The receptionist smiled warmly, her tone kind but professional. "Welcome, Mr. Carter. You can head up to the 12th floor. Mr. Benson's office is at the end of the hall." Elijah nodded his thanks, stepping into the elevator and pressing the button for the 12th floor. As the doors closed, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the polished metal. He barely recognized himself, a young man standing on the edge of something new. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing a quiet hallway lined with sleek photographs and modern art. At the end of the hall, a large wooden door bore a simple nameplate, Charles Benson. Elijah took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and knocked softly. "Come in," came a warm voice from the other side. Elijah pushed the door open, stepping into a spacious yet inviting office. Mr. Benson sat behind a large desk, his glasses perched on the edge of his nose. He looked up as Elijah entered, a smile spreading across his face. "Elijah," he said, standing and extending a hand. "I'm glad you could make it. Thank you for inviting me." "Sir," Elijah replied, shaking his hand, "I'm grateful for this opportunity. Please, have a seat," Mr. Benson said, gesturing to a chair in front of the desk. "I want to get to know the young man who stopped to help me yesterday." Elijah sat, his hands folded tightly in his lap. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, but there was something disarming about Mr. Benson's demeanor. "I won't take up too much of your time," Mr. Benson began, his tone warm but purposeful. "You did something yesterday that many people wouldn't. You stopped to help a stranger, even when you had your own priorities. That speaks volumes about your character." Elijah shifted in his seat, feeling both pride and humility. It just felt like the right thing to do. "Sir," Mr. Benson nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's exactly why I believe in giving you this chance. I see potential in you, potential that I'd like to help nurture. This internship won't be easy. You'll be learning a lot, and it will challenge you in ways you might not expect. But I think you're ready." Elijah's chest tightened, a mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through him. "I won't let you down, sir," Mr. Benson smiled, standing and extending his hand once more. "I don't doubt that for a second. Welcome aboard, Elijah." The rest of the day was a whirlwind. Elijah was introduced to Clara, a sharp, friendly project manager who would be his mentor. She walked him through his responsibilities, handed him a stack of files, and showed him to a small desk tucked in the corner of the bustling office. The work was daunting: data entry, research, and organizing reports, but Elijah dove in with determination. He wanted to prove himself, not just to Mr. Benson, but to himself. Clara checked in periodically, offering guidance and encouragement. By the time lunch rolled around, Elijah felt like he'd accomplished more in a few hours than he had in months. As he sat at a small cafe near the office, eating a simple sandwich and reflecting on the day, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. This was the start of something new, something meaningful. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building a future. When the day finally ended, Elijah returned home exhausted but exhilarated. His mother was waiting for him, her eyes lighting up when he walked through the door. "How was it, Eli?" she asked, her voice filled with curiosity and pride. He sat beside her, his face breaking into a genuine smile. It was incredible. Mom, I've got so much to learn, but I feel like I'm finally doing something that matters. She reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. I knew you could do it. Eli, you're going to go far. I can feel it. As Elijah lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling once again, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. This was just the beginning, but for the first time, the future felt within reach. And with each passing day, he was determined to keep building, not just for himself, but for his mother and the life they deserved. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through Elijah's story. At Empathy Stories, we believe in the transformative power of kindness and determination. If this story inspired you, please like, comment, and subscribe to help us share more tales that touch the heart. Remember, every act of empathy can change a life. See you in our next story.